Good morning, everyone. Welcome to DTF, all my DTF trusted followers. This is Q. I'm going to be taking you through a few things that I learned over the last 2 months while I've been working on this transmission swap. Today's primary focus is going to be going through the transmission control module, the EGS, and computers and how I connect it and coding and all that sort of stuff. It's pretty advanced. I'm not sure I fully understand it, so I'm going to do my best to keep it on track. By all means, this is not a full-on tutorial. There's a lot of knowledge that needs to be understood and reading done to do this, even at the generic level that I'm doing this. So coming back to my list from, I think it was early March when I initiated my trans swap. This is my hit list, and on the last, or second to last, we had coding and TCM, which in this vehicle it's called the EGS, the electronic gear. It's translated from German, but it's basically the transmission control module. You probably thought I forgot about this list, but like I said, it took a long time of reading through forums, and there's a few YouTube videos out there on some of this stuff, E36 based, but nothing specific to the Z3. So it's just been taking a while for me to get a handle and a grasp on enough knowledge to go ahead and do this. So what I'm going to go through today, I went down the rabbit hole a little bit, followed the white rabbit into some coding, programming, and calibration stuff. So I'm going to go through the ZCS and the VO, and this will make a little more sense as we go further. OBD and CAN bus. That CAN bus definitely put it in reverse and drove over me a couple times. And then the software and the interface that I used, and then writing the ZCS to get you to the state that I'm currently in. So we'll go ahead and jump in the car for a second and show you where I'm at and talk about a few things that people have done that I've seen on videos when they're going through this conversion themselves. So in the grand scheme of things, what we're trying to accomplish is a full manual swap with no trouble codes and using the proper portion of the engine control module for the manual transmission, i.e. the appropriate sections of the calibration for the manual, because they are slightly different, and I'll go into a little tidbit about that as well, just from my understanding. And then, yeah, we'll get into the coding stuff after that. So the current state that I'm in, you may or may not see, I only have the gear shift light remaining on. And this is with transmission control module, or the EGS, completely removed from the wiring harness, and everything is happy, no codes, no check engine light. So the first iteration of what I did, so I've put about 1,200 miles on this car since I did the conversion. During that time, the coding and the electrical aspects of the automatic transmission were still kind of in the background. Everything functioned, but I'm just trying to kind of finalize this to be as complete as I can of a conversion. So in watching some other YouTube videos and reading through forums, I would recommend looking at some forums. I'll put some links to stuff down below that I was reading, but you know, these cars are from 1990s, so there's 20 years worth of people figuring things out with these things, and you do have to kind of feel your way around it, and after you read through quite a bit, you'll kind of recognize some of the members that seem to know more about what they're doing than others that maybe are just putting stuff out there that's not exactly accurate. And I'm not going to go into that stuff because I am still learning a lot, and there's not a full understanding on my behalf about all this stuff and how it works. I just have enough to get me to the point where I think I'm I'm good with the conversion, and I can move on to more projects. So with that, what I've seen some other people do, after they get all the wiring complete, they take the transmission control module, which I can show that to you. So this is the EGS right here, and on my 98 it lives in here. This is where the engine control module and my EGS module lived. Here's the connector for the harness. So the first thing that people do that I saw for the E36 is they open this controller up. Voila! Here is the chip that has all the brains basically of this module on it. They remove that, put the cover back on, and install this back on the harness, and leave this in the car without the chip in it. When I did that, what I had was a check engine light, and then I had that gear light on. So the engine control module was not happy with that. So the next thing that I did was, all right, well, if it's not happy with that, let me go ahead and just take the whole module out. So I took the whole module out, and that's how I've been running around for, like I said, about the last 1,200 miles. And the lights that I had on in the dash were for the ASC, and then the gear for the transmission controller. So that means I didn't have traction control, and maybe possibly that was affecting the ABS as well, but I can't verify that because I didn't have a scenario where I activated ABS. Anyway, so I ran around with this without this installed, and those two lights on the dash, no problems. Cruise control worked, and there was no check engine lights or anything like that. So the engine was happy, but the transmission indicator was on, which, who cares? You're not connected to a transmission anymore, and there's no control module in there, and it's not going to mess anything up. So I was running around with that. So my end goal with this was to get the ASC working again, and then no engine control module codes. So that's where I'm at today with the coding. But you could, I've seen some E36 guys just removing that chip and then removing the light bulb in the instrument panel, which, like I said, when I left the control module in, the engine wasn't happy. So control module completely out, ASC wasn't happy, but engine was, and I'm more concerned about that. So where do we go from there? ZCS and VO. So what's that is referring to is the central coding key. So that's ZCS is Zentralkodierungsschlüssel in German, and that is, like I just said, the central coding key. And what that does is it tells the car and the plethora of modules, electronic modules in it, what configuration it's in. So these vehicles were sold in all kinds of markets and with multiple different options installed. So variety of transmissions, ABS, probably light control modules, that sort of thing, depending on what market it's in. So this is ZCS, and I'll show you what that looks like here. So under the lid for my engine control module fuse box assembly, you'll see these three numbers, the GM, the SA, and the VN. So those numbers are what make up the ZCS. So within these strings of code, so this is hexadecimal, so it can be 16 letters or numbers for each position within that index. So I needed to figure out which one of these controlled whether my engine control module and the rest of the car thought it was a manual versus automatic. And I will show that in more detail on my computer when I get to that. But ZCS here, I don't know what I'm trying to say. This is what tells the car what configuration it is. Some vehicles around the same era also had a VO, which is a vehicle order. Essentially the same thing, but it uses a larger string of characters, allowing more options to be controlled, yes or no. Next, these vehicles, the mid-90s, were built in an era where OBD emissions control stuff was in a bit of an infant stage, and there was more complexity beginning to come about. And the cars in this era definitely had a hodgepodge of different technologies and protocols and things like that. So on my Z3, it is an OBD2 car. As you can see here, I have my 16-pin OBD2 connector. Little panel will say the OBD as well. Some cars you'll find it in the footwell of the driver's side. And then we also have this 20-pin connector underneath the hood. Now, these vehicles connect all their control modules via something called CAN bus, and there's different iterations of CAN bus technology in means of the protocols used. So early on it was called L line. After that I think it was K line, and now there's D line. So those are what options of protocols and interfaces you need to interface with your car. For this Z3, it seems that I can access all the control modules through the 20-pin connector. So you have an adapter for that, to OBD, and then that's the 16-pin OBD connector, and then I have an OBD/ADS interface, and I can change what type of connection I'm going for. On these vehicles, it seems that ADS is what's working for me, and that accesses the modules on the L line, from my understanding. In order to utilize this properly, you're going to need a serial connector, a 9-pin DB9 connector, and a computer that can handle that. So we're talking about older tech here. You can see there, got the 9-pin serial connector on the back of this Dell, and this Dell is running a 32-bit version of Windows XP Service Pack 3. And you'll need a 32-bit system to operate the software that I'm using with this today. I think it's partially due to drivers for this ADS interface are not developed beyond 32-bit. I believe you can do Windows 7 and then XP. I'm not sure about before that, but essentially that's what I got here. So I got this older computer for $125, and then I spent about $75 on this interface. Some of the newer stuff for K-line stuff, you can use these adapters. I think I paid $35 for this. That came with the 20-pin serial connector, and that connects to the newer systems via USB. And then you'll just have to use the newer software to interface with that. But for this generation of car, like I said, the ADS is what's working best for me. So next we'll get into the interface and the software, and then writing the ZCS. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this laptop up. All right, so one of the things I had mentioned about going after this coding and the necessity for it, rather than just leaving stuff plugged in and letting it work the way it works, This is the calibration for my 98 Z3 with the 2.8 liter. And you can see up here that it identifies it E3639Z3 with the MS41.1 controller, manual transmission slash automatic transmission. So I believe this code or calibration set is designed to work with both transmissions. The engine control module just needs to know which one of those transmissions it is, and it'll follow the appropriate calibration set based on that input. So that's why we're trying to tell the engine control module that it's a manual transmission car now. I tried to pull up on the left side here a few things that appear to be affected by manual versus automatic. And the biggest thing that I can see is the light throttle automatic versus manual venous control. And then also idle speed control for an automatic versus not. And then the idle air control valve controlling. So the best I can see is between manual and automatic, there's an adjustment for the Vanos under light load for when it's engaged based on load, and it's slightly different between manual and automatic. The idle air control valve appears to be controlled in the same manner no matter what, but there was, where was it, over here, the idle control speed for an automatic in drive. So I mean, this vehicle is going to remain out of drive because it doesn't have an automatic transmission, so it won't get the signal for that. So it should remain in this nominal idle speed for the manual transmission. So everything should function in that manner. There's probably more deeper within like fuel management and stuff like that, possibly for shift areas, shift zones, but this is basically what I could find. And not having a full understanding of that, that's kind of where I'm going to leave that at the moment. Still trying to learn that. Alright, so for connecting to the car, as I mentioned, going the 20 pin. Got my 20 pin adapter. Alright, adapter's getting power. That goes serial to the back of your PC. And now for this, you do want to make sure that you've got the battery on a charger, as this will drain it because you're going to be in the ignition on position. And you don't want the battery to drop below a certain voltage while you're accessing these control modules, because that will or potentially damage what you have. In the sense that I mean, we're not going to be calibrating anything, so it shouldn't, or programming, so it shouldn't affect the modules in the sense that it's going to break them or anything like that, because we're playing with options. So imagine if the read send of the protocol wasn't completed, then the control module is just going to remain whatever state it was in. So I powered that down by accident. Now I'm probably glassing right over a lot of this stuff just because, like I said, you need to get an understanding for yourself before you dive into this. And I'm not understanding it at a level where I can teach at this moment, so I'm kind of going to leave it up to you to figure a few things out on yourself. I'm just showing you the setup that worked for me. There was plenty of information out there on mostly E46s when it comes to ZCS and VO coding. There wasn't a whole lot for the 36s, or more specifically the Z3. All right, within Windows, what I'm using Now there's a whole BMW suite of tools, and I couldn't get it all working, so I'm using what I could get working. Here's what I used. I used INPA. That's basically some diagnostic stuff within a virtual machine, because this is how it was available on the interwebs. I'm running DIS version 44 with GT1, and that is a dealer level software that can diagnose, program, code. It kind of does the whole thing from an electrical aspect of the vehicle. So we'll get into that. There is another way to access this coding through a program called NCS Expert, but I was not able to fully communicate with the modules, so I kind of left that to the wayside and found this DIS version 44 to work a bit more consistently, let's just say. So in order to start up, you start your diagnostic head emulator. Run that. This is set up. This is initiating the communication between, I believe, the computer and the virtual machine. Kind of the network aspect of allowing the virtual machine to communicate through this computer to the ADS interface. So I've got both of those started. We'll open up VM workstation. While that's loading, let me talk about something else. How do you get your ZCS for the manual transmission? Good question. So there is a configuration file within the NCS Expert. It's called I think it's a DATN file. Essentially, it is like a reference document or for the software for the options. Let's see, we're NCS Expert, DATN. Now there's going to be different DATN files for all the different series of vehicles. Since we're working E36, what we're looking at is where you at? E36 ZST with the 000. You can open that with Notepad. So this is all the different coding options for the various options on the car, and this goes into everything, including like color, smoking package, trim levels, automatic versus manual, and this breaks it down by those three sections of code: the GM, the SA, and the VN. From this, you can manipulate the numbers that you started with to get what you need for the options installed on your vehicle. So I went through this process, and there's some tutorials on the forums. You have to find that. The code I got was not accepted by the vehicle. I tried coding it, and it basically said, no, this doesn't fit the vehicle. So I had to find an alternate method. And what that was is, since I knew that the code was on the label underneath that cover, what I did was I Googled that that panel cover lid and found several, 6 or 7 that were for sale on eBay with pictures. And if those pictures had the label on the underside, I tried to read what the ZCS was, and then once I did that, I made a collection of all the ZCSs that I found. They also have the VIN number for that vehicle on that label, so I typed that VIN into a VIN decoder and identified the year, engine type, and transmission type for that VIN, and that helped me narrow down which ones had a manual with the 6-cylinder engine. And from there I found that, so right here, all the ones I found with manual of the 6-cylinder were the S52s, so the M Roadsters or M Coupes. And then here, this one right here is the one for my current vehicle. And you can see the difference here on this VN number. The third digit in is a B or a Bravo. And on all the manual transmission cars, that VN is a 9. So what I ended up doing was I found 3 of these S52 manual transmission ZCS codes, and they're all the same. So I used this VN right here off of the S52 manual transmission and plugged that into my car, and now I'm at a state where I do not have the automatic transmission control module in. All the codes are cleared, ASC is happy, engine is happy, and the only thing left is that one gear warning light, which the transmission control module is no longer connected, so I don't really care about that. I just wanted to make sure that all the other modules were happy. Alright, that's kind of putting the cart before the horse here though. Alright, so now what we're looking at is DIS, Diagnostic and Information System, version 44. And this is the Easy DIS version 1.0 install, and this is accessible at this website right here. There's also some guides, and there is the version 57, I think. It's the next level of software for some newer cars if you want to use that. Alright, so now in the software I went into coding programming. Bam. Here I went into ZCF FA coding. Hit that little green arrow on the bottom. Please wait. Yes, this is what we're doing. Continuing. Important. Okay. On some of these screens there are some notes if you have questions about what they're talking about. Alright, so we're going to choose our series. Now there was some understanding on the forums that the ZCS is stored in 2 master control modules, the EWS and then the instrument cluster, the combi. For some reason, I can't figure this out, but I can't access the instrument cluster, and here in a second when I go into recoding, it's going to ask me about that instrument cluster. So I have an inkling suspicion that the ZCS is only stored in the EWS on this vehicle. And basically, during the startup sequence, all the other control modules reference the EWS ZCS code, and then they follow that configuration. Alright, so I went to recoding. This stuff works pretty slowly. This is why you need to be on the battery charger. Speaking of which, gotta have the ignition in the on position to access all this stuff. That might help. All right, let's get back into that. That might have messed up the sequence of things here. See, still learning, not a master. All right. Recoding, next. The setup and configuration of this DIS software was pretty overwhelming. I did find some information and walkthroughs on both that website, the forums, but ultimately I found this YouTube video from like 12 years ago from a guy called Taboosh. I'll try linking that down in the description. And he went through some stuff in the background that was not mentioned in any of the other walkthroughs. So ultimately it was his guide YouTube video. It was like an hour and 30 minutes long or something that helped me figure all this out. So here it's asking if the instrument cluster is equipped with a fuel consumption indicator or an oil temperature gauge, which for this car, you do not have that. Now don't mistake this for oil temperature. That is coolant temperature, and you can tell by the little finned thing with a water symbol at the bottom. That's coolant temperature, not oil temperature. And that is not fuel consumption, that is fuel level. So on the other cars, you'll see that like fuel economy needle here. That's what they're talking about for that. So this vehicle is not equipped with that. So you go here and you answer no, it does not have those. All right, code cannot be read out of the combi. I'm guessing it's because of, for that type of cluster, it's not possible. So I'm not sure if I just can't access it or if it's not a CAN bus module. Because there were some control or some instrument clusters that have a little chip on the back that need to be bench flash for certain things. So maybe that's what these have on them. So here are the modules that I can code in this portion. So the ZVM, that is the body control module, like the general body control module. EWS, that's the security system. Airbag, pretty straightforward. ASC and DC, that's your stability control. Since the EWS is the master of this, I select that module. Because if you change it in the EWS, it should transfer that knowledge to all the other modules. So what we're doing here is recoding. So selecting that. Control. Yep. These are just notes for like the technicians. Yeah, it's installed, works properly, ignition is on. Yep, you can verify that. The ignition is on, and you can hear, I think it's the fuel pump humming. All right, there's my chassis number, the VIN number. Did that change? No, that's not changing. All right, so you select no. Here is the ZCS. So my initial ZCS, as I mentioned, this digit right here, the third one in, was a B with a number 5 as the checksum digit. This right here is the ZCS VIN portion that I'd showed you that I collected from all the S52 manual transmission cars. So that is what I put in there. It's already in here. I've done this. I had to walk through it just to make sure it worked. So I don't care that I look like a fool on here, but I just want to make sure that the process flow worked. So here I'm going to select no, but if you were changing it like I did initially, you would select yes for change. And it's going to go through each of these 3 segments and ask you to input them on the right side. If it didn't change, just put the same one in there and continue forward. Change? No. Start automatic coding? Yes. So here it's going to write it to the EWS. It's active, wait for it to do it. Now in some of the literature I found for DIS, it said that when it does this automatic coding, it is also writing it to the other pertinent control modules that need it, i.e. the ECM, ASC, I believe, and maybe ABS. Anyway, here it says it did not change, but that's because we didn't change it. I had already changed it previously. Coding is complete. Turn ignition off, wait for 10 seconds, turn ignition on again, and carry out functional check. So basically, after you done this, you can turn the ignition off. Let's go back to the start here. Turn the ignition off for 10 seconds. Sometimes the door open helps to reset that. but that might be for different vehicles, I don't know. So I do have a little bit of background in calibration. I worked for Chrysler for a couple of years under the transmission calibration team. I didn't get to be a full-on calibrator before I left, but I definitely have some time fiddling around with calibrations and connecting to cars and things like that. So that adds a little bit to my comfort level of doing things. It feels like about 10 seconds. So let's go back in. And after that, what I did was I ran alignment EWS DME, and I think that just is a manual way to push the proper ZCS to the ECM, or the DME. And that's about all I did. After that, I did get out of here. Oops. Yep, I'm done with that. Okay, shut it down. There's definitely some magic stuff within the setup of this. So, like I said, if you reference the stuff I'll link below, you may get a knowledge of working to the level where I'm at right now, where I can turn this on, I can adjust stuff and shut it down and do it over again, and the vehicle runs afterwards. This old stuff does take a while to run. It's not like our computer's up today, for sure. Alright, so we can close this. We're done with that. Close the virtual machine. Close the interface. I gotta stop it first. Good call. Thanks for letting me know. Alright, and then I went into IMPA. So this is based on version 6.3.4 or 0.7. You have to use like the older version to work with a 32-bit system, essentially, is what it comes down to, from my understanding. So we got the Shift F5 for old models. Bam. Running E36 engine. Control module, we got the MS 41.1 with the M52 US with OBD2. That's my controller module. Yep, I know there's that. So now you can access the control module, read the memory. There is. So this is saying there's a failure of the secondary air pump, it looks like, which is normal because, hey, look at that. I removed my secondary air pump and been running with a block off plate down here instead, which it typically doesn't give me a code for that unless I don't let it warm up for like 90 seconds before I drive it. So as you can see, no errors with respect to the EGS. So I'm just gonna go ahead and clear that. Okay, clear all that. F10, go back. Shift F5. So I can access the engine. Chassis, I can also get into the ABS, because I did have some codes for that. F4, F1, read memory. No errors in the ABS, or the ASC, excuse me. And you can try accessing the transmission control module here, but it's not going to let you because it is removed from the vehicle. All right, let's go into EWS. F3, there's all the coding stuff. F4, F1, read memory. Something about the date communication failure by key number. That might be something with my key fob. I know that it can't lock the vehicle, so maybe it's just that issue, but nothing to do with transmission control or anything like that. So we'll just go ahead and clear that again, and then F10 out of there. So I've kind of gone through the major modules that are affected by all this, and everything appears to be functioning appropriately. So we can go ahead and pull the key. And this kind of gets me to where I'm at now with, I've got just that little gear light indicator in the cluster, and honestly I don't care about that, because who knows, maybe the clusters with manual transmissions came without a bulb in that because there's nothing that would be connected to it. So it may just be I need to take that bulb out, which I'm going to do anyway, but there's no OBD related faults on the car, and everything seems to run appropriately. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave everything at. I think I went far enough down this rabbit hole, and I'm just going to accept that this is where I'm at with that one dash light, and all the modules are happy. No fault codes associated with the transmission. And everything runs properly, it shifts, the cruise control works. And all right, we'll just call it there for today. Thanks for tuning in. I do have 55 subscribers now, which I'm pretty happy about. Hopefully the content that I bring forward, such as this, which was fairly complex on my end, kind of helps bring some more people in, because there wasn't a whole lot of stuff on the Z3 itself. I want to say a special thanks and shout out to Gus. He was number 55 just about an hour before taping this. All right, you guys have a good day. We'll talk to you later.